I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then Paul, I'll ask you to do a quick introduction as well before we get down into the details of the report launch itself. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. My name's Alan Bell. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Equus Software. I've been doing technology for the last 9 years here, although I've been doing global mobility for 25 years now. In the Big Four and also in-house. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm really delighted to be here with my friend and colleague, Paul Gucciardi from IBM. Paul, would you mind just giving a quick intro?
Hi, Alan. Thank you. And hi, Alex, too. Thank you. So my name's Paul Gucciardi, as Alan said. I work for IBM. I'm a senior HRIT manager in the mobility space, and I've been in the mobility space for a little bit more than 12 years right now.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Glad to have you with us today. So it's really good to be back talking about surveys again. This is our launch webinar for our survey that we've done in partnership with Global Mobility Executive and Equus Software, the evolving mobility technology landscape 2022. We last did this in 2020. We skipped a year because of the pandemic, but it's nice that we're now on the other side, and we've got some comparative results to be able to share with you today. We do invite you to ask questions as we're going along, and we'll make sure that we have time at the end for a Q&A as well. So let's look a little bit at demographics of the survey for this year. We had a total of 95 participants, again, still typically dominated by North America and Europe, which is the more mature markets for the global mobility industry. Good to have a little bit more representation from Asia this time around. A real mix of different sizes of organizations were involved, as well as the number of people on mobility teams. Interestingly, if you look at the average team size for mobility teams, still less than 5 people on a team, or certainly less than 10, still makes up 2/3 of our industry. So mobility is still small teams managing massive workloads and seeing how we can help everyone with that. Nice mix of industry representation as well. Quite a lot in the technology, IT, telecommunications, and professional services. It's quite a broad category there, but a good mix across all the various industry sectors as we look at the data that we're going to be putting in the survey ourselves. So let's start and look at, what are the types of moves that people are dealing with, and how are those being looked at. We've heard a lot in the industry about business travel coming on board, remote work, mobility teams being asked to do more and more. And that's certainly true. If we look at the volume of international assignments, there's still an awful lot of organizations where international assignments, they're moving less than 50 people a year. And then there may be, looking at the number of permanent transfers that are being moved. We're certainly seeing an increase in the number of permanent transfers over the last 2 years. International assignments are still recovering from the pandemic. And so the volumes are still probably a little lower than we would expect. A lot more permanent transfers since the pandemic, and certainly in the last 2 years, around what organizations are having to deal with. A lot more in the business travel space, where mobility teams are starting to take on business travelers a lot more than they used to be. And then, unsurprisingly, it's been a topic that we've extensively talked about over the last 2 years in terms of remote work requests and hybrid work requests. A lot more remote work requests being dealt with by mobility teams than 2 years ago. I think the key thing from here is a lot of mobility teams are having to manage all different types of moves and take on more responsibility. And Paul, I'm curious, what's been your experience at IBM around move types? Have you seen a change in the mix of move types that you've had to deal with over the past couple of years, or are move types recovering from where they were? What's happening at IBM in that space?
Yes. So Alan, in the audience here, pre-pandemic, we were averaging about 3,800, 3,900 assignments a year. And that was inclusive of permanent transfers, international assignments, immigration-only tracking, et cetera. And during the pandemic, obviously, that went down. And currently, we're back up to around 1,500 this year alone, year-to-date September. So it is picking up. However, the domestic relocation is growing, as well as the permanent transfers. Remote work has always been an option for IBM, and we continue to push in that space to allow people to work where they are, which sometimes is not only more cost effective, but more appropriate for the work-life balance.
And are you anticipating, Paul, an expansion of growth in any of the particular policy or move types that you're dealing with?
So we're looking for definitely expansion in business traveler. We're putting some more business rules around that space, as well as, and that ties into immigration as well, because sometimes we all know how easy it is to travel in Europe, so you do need the appropriate documents. And then obviously more around the domestic reload. We're adding some technology to support that program because it is growing.
Right. That's interesting. And I think if we look at some of those shifts and move types, as we were talking about, at the smaller level, we're definitely seeing still that small organizations, the smaller programs are still dealing with the typical international assignments. Big shift in permanent transfers this year and shift in business travel as we look at the comparative data. But I think what's interesting is you start to look at the size of overall programs. So if I'm an organization that's got less than 200 total moves that I'm dealing with, what's the mix that I'm dealing with? And, at the smaller end of the market, which was about 23 respondents, you can see that in that end of the market, the smaller programs are still dealing, broadly speaking, with international assignments, permanent transfers, a little bit of domestic, maybe a pickup in the amount of remote work, but they've got a nice kind of even balance of mix. I think what was interesting for me as I was looking through the data, as we start to look at as program size increases, we start to look at 200 to 500 overall moves, or we look at 500 to 1,000 overall moves. A lot more in terms of the immigration only or compliance only tracking. A lot more business travel being managed at the kind of mid-sized program level. A lot less international assignments than before. So really an interesting mix as we look at the overall program size and the number of people. And when we look at how that then translates into technology, right? So we're looking at all these different move types and who's got technology, why people have got technology. One of the healthy things, I think, compared with 2020 when we last surveyed the data, is that we've definitely got an increase in the number of people that are using technology solutions to help support and manage their mobility program. Quite a big jump there, almost 30% increase, which is really great. And correlated with that, we've got a real increase in satisfaction with solutions. So that means that the technology market as a whole in this space is really responding to the need of organizations by delivering solutions that are useful for them in delivering value. And as we look at, what are some of those valuable impacts, why are people wanting technology? What are the key drivers around that? It is still very much the top two or top three very much are around compliance making sure that organizations are compliant, meeting their compliance organization obligations, whether that's, you know, from a tax perspective or being able to do immigration, understand work permit needs. Also making sure that the employee experience, which is a theme that, you know, we've heard in the industry for the last few years, continues to be a delight. And then it's about reporting and insights, you know, and I think that those are really value drivers for why people are using technology. And as we look at some of those features around that, you know, what are the most important features in that space? The ease of implementation is really important. The cost affordability is important, and, you know, integration abilities. You know, being able to integrate across systems and use technology in an ecosystem of tools that mobility teams are having to manage. Paul, does that resonate with you in terms of, you know, what you find is the most valuable impacts of technology? Is there anything that surprises you there around those results?
There's nothing that surprises me, but Alan, I lump the experiences into four buckets, if you would. We got the user experience, and we're always talking about user experience. There is another experience, which I call is we tend to put ourselves last in mobility because we're always worried about our users, but it's that whole mobility administration experience. Then there's the compliance experience, and then finally the analytics experience. And the way we've structured mobility here at IBM is that you need to have a really robust technology platform in order to administer those experiences. And if you have that platform, it makes it easier to do. On the previous slide, where you had IAs, permanent transfers, business travelers, immigration, it's very easy to administer those programs if you have a robust technology platform. And like I said, I lump them into those four buckets of experience: user experience, mobility, administration experience, compliance, and analytics.
And would you say, Paul, that tools that are out there on the market are starting to deliver more in those areas, that those themes, you know, the technology, the marketplace for technology is keeping up with those trends?
I think for the most part, most vendors are keeping up. The technology is keeping up with the industry changes. But there was a good article recently in one of the IT rags saying that if technology companies want to be relevant in the industry, they have to keep up. Otherwise, they'll fall by the wayside. So I think it's important for the mobility teams to consider that, which, you know, technology companies are keeping up with the times. And it's not going to just be one program any longer, moving a person for a 6-month assignment from a home to a host. We have to embrace all the different programs that are out there today. The COVID accelerated that. It's a different model than it was just 2 years ago when the survey was conducted.
Yeah. And I'm curious, you know, I was at a Worldwide ERC recently, and I was on a panel there where I heard very loudly from the audience that organizations were looking for one platform to be able to deliver all of these different program types rather than lots of different tools. Is that true in the kind of IBM world? Does that resonate with you, that type of message? Or do you think it's still better that, you know, you can have lots of different tools, we just need them all to integrate together?
Well, my personal philosophy and the philosophy we're using within mobility here is to have a core set of tools. And there is one centralized platform for administering the program, because to the point in the, you know, on the slide here, it says most important features of technology is the integration ability. So if there's less tools, there's less worries about integration. But also to administer the different programs, you do want a platform that's very open, meaning it allows us to configure it, to tailor it to our wants and needs, and not have a platform that's very rigid in nature where we can't accommodate the way we want to administer mobility. We showed on a previous slide how technology and professional services were the biggest mobility movers, and that's for a reason. They need to be with the customer. So those programs are very different than other programs that may have an IE, an international assignment that's internal only, not customer facing. So again, to summarize, you need a platform that allows a very high degree of flexibility without a lot of overhead to administer it.
Yeah, I think that's really important messaging there. So as we look on through the survey, and we start to look at technology usage, I found this one fascinating as well. Especially as we look at comparisons year on year. Smaller programs, certainly smaller programs in terms of volume of what they're having to deal with, very much still reliant on Excel, right? Still over 50% of those smaller programs having to manage their mobility and administration on Microsoft Excel or in-house tool that they've built. There's very few at the smaller end of the market that are investing in global mobility specific tools. So we start to get up in terms of program size. The business case around bringing in more dedicated, more powerful global mobility specific technology is there, right? It starts to make itself present. There's still a heavy reliance on relocation provider tools, in some of the heavily outsourced programs, but there is still a huge amount of reliance on Microsoft Excel. And even in those scenarios, where organizations have got a mix, right? They may be using a relocation provider tool, they may be using a global mobility tech provided tool, but they're also using Excel for other bits of the program as well. So there's still this natural tendency to go back to spreadsheets and say, they're easy, they're quick to implement, they're low cost, I can do certain things on them. And I think that's going to be interesting as we move forward. What are those features that we can drive away from spreadsheets and get more people using that? Do you find, Paul, at all that in IBM you ever have people that are using your GM technology tool, but then they keep their own little spreadsheet on the side for some of their tasks that they want to do on a daily basis?
Well, where we have forced everybody to that centralized platform, but people are using spreadsheets for analytics, and there is a huge opportunity around analytics to standardize in a platform as well. Having an internal solution or a spreadsheet to manage a program means that you're also maintaining that when your time could be spent on value add activities, assisting the assignee or assisting the transferee if it's a domestic relo. It could be working with the business partners to ensure the duty of care, for example, versus just trying to constantly maintain a spreadsheet. But at the same time, if you do want to maintain a spreadsheet, that means you have to become a SME and maybe immigration or tax, or working more closely with your business partners if it's outsourced. But again, at the same time, I feel, and I think all of IBM embraces that, is you're losing some of the best practices you might gain or will gain by working with a standard platform or platforms. Because you're to invent it in an in-house app or having to invent it in a spreadsheet, which leaves you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, you mentioned analytics. Do you feel, and analytics was one of the things that was brought up earlier as one of the most important features. do you feel as though there's enough analytics available in the market on the tools that are available? Do you feel as though that's an area that actually, if there was greater investment in there, if you could filter more data real time, if you could use the kind of power that you get from, tools like Power BI or from Tableau, that if those were built into some of the kind of tools, then the analytics piece would become so much easier for organizations.
There's no question there's a lot of tools in that space, but having it built into a platform makes it that much easier. And then the opportunities in using those tools are endless. How quickly can you get cost of assignment if you're maintaining spreadsheets and trying to bring in actual data, et cetera? If you have an in-house built app, same situation. But having the tools directly connected to that platform has endless possibilities. From simple dashboards, what's your top 10 countries you're home and host? What's the mix? Is it accompanied, unaccompanied? Those are everyday metrics that we're all measured on, KPIs. But one of the things that's important in that graph that you showed that said technology and professional services, the most important metric there is the speed of landing. How fast can you get the person on the ground, and measure that with the analytics? Because obviously with professional services, those are new revenue to a company versus an internal.
And actually being able to predict how quickly you can get someone there, it takes it that next step forward.
Exactly. Embed some of the AI in there as well. Yes, absolutely.
Great. So let's look at, some of the barrier to adoption, of still what's going on in the technology space and, why people are maybe using technology and then maybe not, interestingly. And I think this is a fascinating statistic. 93% of people still felt as though they weren't educated enough on what is available in the marketplace from a technology perspective in global mobility. And that actually is a stat that I heard as well when I was at ERC earlier in the year, that there's a real lack of education about what's available out there. And, there are still typical other barriers for organization. Cost still up there, 50%. The time to implement, having the resources available to implement. People feeling as though their population's too small, or, there's a lack of perceived value there, no team to administer the technology itself. And of course, we've got some looming economic factors that are happening at a macro level, with cost of living, energy prices, and wonder if we're going into a recession, whether or not those cost areas will still continue to become even more important as we move forward. Paul, anything there that kind of resonates with you?
Well, just some advice around education and what's what's out there. And people should be aware that WWERC offers information about vendors that are providing the different platforms. Also, too, I know that the the Society of Human Resources, they also have on their website vendors or business partners that provide the technology. And looking at a points here for cost implications and time to implement, there's many different possibilities today, so don't sell yourself short. There's SaaS cloud opportunities, there's RMCs today. There are you don't have to have necessarily a full-blown implementation the way some of the structures are. Sorry. But you can it's almost like buying time on a computer today. There's models like that allow you to embrace that technology that could relieve you of maintaining those spreadsheets and those internal built apps and work on the value add, as I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But
we have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, and probably a good time to pick up those before we forget about them. There's a question here that says, for those who need to move away from spreadsheets and are trying to get onto a software solution, what would you say are the most frequently accessed dashboard features that could help industry professionals adopt software with confidence and get the data that they need? As you look at the type of analytics and dashboards that you're using a lot within IBM, Paul, what would you say are the ones that are most frequently used that really help you and help your teams around the world adopt the software that you're using?
One critical one that everybody uses, and we allow our business unit managers as well to have access to it, is a forecast. So we go through phases in IBM for the assignment. We call it, it's in draft mode, it's pending, it's in approval, it's current, meaning the person's on the assignment, and then they're completed and they're repatriating. So you can use that dashboard to see for your business unit and for mobility in general, what is my forecast? Where is my workload? If I have all of a sudden a lot of people in draft and pending stage, I know I'm going to, in the next 30, 60 days, have a lot of work to get those people to the destination. Another dashboard that is measures our KPI is, as I mentioned earlier, that speed of landing. How long is it taking an individual to get on the ground? And for us, for IBM, those represents revenue. So we want to measure that. We want to get the person there as quickly as possible. So those are two key ones that I don't see any mobility program not having those, how they can see what's coming down their pipeline and how fast.
I think that, I would agree, workload management, being able to manage what your team's having to deal with, but give real-time visibility into what's happening, and coupled with that real-time visibility of managing what your vendors are doing for you, because there's so many people involved in the mobility process, being able to understand exactly where in that cycle someone is, when was an application filed, what's the latest data. But I think also cost data as well. You can get a lot of really powerful cost analytics these days from technology that helps teams, really get that value and adopt it. There's another question here that says, does the lack of technology impact on talent acquisition suggest that there's not a wide adoption of AI in this area, and tools such as AI-driven assessments for talent screening? I know that in my personal experience, it's not a massive area of where I've seen people do AI kind of talent screening as to whether someone's right for an assignment or, whether they should be moved. I know you're doing some interesting things with AI at IBM in terms of mobility. Any thoughts around that one, Paul?
Yeah, we're not looking at talent acquisition in AI. I know there's a lot of concern in that in human resource circles, but where we are using AI is we've tried to break away from the so-called policies that everybody has to fit into a policy. What we're doing is no two assignments are alike, no two people are alike. That we collect information on previous assignments, plus we add to the individual's particular upcoming assignment, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, et cetera, traveling alone or accompanied, et cetera. And based on previous experience, we're using AI to put together a tailored program or policy for that individual. And that incorporates some of the cost flex. And, you don't necessarily have to use AI with that. You could, having a standard platform, looking at what happened in the past through, pulling a report out, you can manually tailor a program for an individual. But at the end of the day, the more technology a company embraces, conjunction with what they, how it's administered, will make the program better. There's no question about it.